Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial, starts right now.
It's been a little more than 48 hours since a mistrial was declared. The family of John O'Keefe is still waiting for some kind of resolution, while the fate of Karen Reed hangs in the balance.
I think the prosecution's in a really tough spot with this hung verdict. I don't think this trial answered what happened to John O'Keefe. I just don't think it answered it.
Tonight, Emily D. Baker, the internet's go-to legal analyst, will join us live. Why she believes the deadlocked jury could mean a win for the defense. Plus, he played a key role for the defense. You saw him sitting behind Reed and her attorneys every day in court. Now he's speaking with Canton Confidential first about the trial and the visual elements used to support their case. Good evening, I'm Glenn Jones. J.C. Monahan has the night off. As we try to look ahead to what's next, we want to focus on a person many of you have asked about, and that's Judge Beverly Cannone. She's no stranger to high-profile cases, but not everyone thought she should preside over this one. Here's a quick introduction to her resume and her alleged ties to the O'Keefe case. Karen Reed's defense team worked hard to get Judge Beverly Cannone thrown off the case, citing a conflict of interest. She was having none of it.
I reject the notion that untrue and unsubstantiated rumors spread on the internet can force a judge to recuse herself from a case.
According to court filings, the defense claimed the judge was connected to Sean McCabe, the brother-in-law of Jennifer McCabe. Jennifer is best known for this Google search. The defense recusal motion leaned on an affidavit from Aidan Kearney, the blogger known as Turtle Boy. He claimed to have proof of a connection between the judge and the McCabe family because on Facebook, Sean referred to her as Auntie Bev and knew about her seaside cottage on the Cape. From the bench, Judge Cannone dismissed it all.
And doesn't that underscore the fact that anybody can say or write anything and try to make it the basis of a motion to recuse? And I think it points out that this motion to recuse is not credible.
Beverly Cannone went to UMass Amherst and New England Law, spent years as a public defender before ascending to the Superior Court bench 10 years ago on an appointment from Governor Deval Patrick. Recently, she presided over the Emmanuel Lopes double murder trial twice and is expected to be in charge of the Brian Walsh murder trial, too. Joining me in studio tonight is local attorney Morgietta Durissier. It's good to have you back, especially because you've worked in a Judge Cannone courtroom before. So when you look back on her performance from the pretrial motions to the jury instructions and then to the declaration of a mistrial, how did she perform?
So again, just remember that the judge's role is to be fair and impartial, to make sure, especially during a trial, that the facts get out to the jury and that they understand it. If you're looking at it from that measure, I think she did a really good job. She made some of these objections go a little bit quicker than most people would have liked, but we were talking about a 9-week, 8-week trial, right? Mm-hmm. So at that measure, she did what a judge in her position should do: get the facts to the jury, move on to the next point, so you're not belaboring some of the issues. Okay.
We've received a number of questions from our viewers about the Commonwealth's decision to retry the case. This one is from Maureen. Is there any chance a different judge could get appointed for the next trial, or will it be the same one, given the speculation that she has connections to some of the witnesses? And we saw her strongly refute that there are any connections. But what about her carrying over to the next trial?
So, again, you just said it, speculation, right? Somebody has to come forward with some real concrete evidence, and maybe some of that has come out through the trial, maybe not. But it can't just be the speculation, the rumors as it's been characterized. You have to have articulable reasons why this particular judge is going to interfere with the justice of Karen Reed if they retry her again. So, it has to be a little bit stronger than that.
So in this case, we ended with a mistrial. In the first Emmanuel Lopes case, there also was no decision. She had to declare a mistrial. Does that tell us anything about the Brian Walsh case, which she is also presiding over? Should we assume in any way that that's going to be the outcome?
Again, these are all jury trial cases, right? Unfortunately, some of them are all really high profile, some more high profile than others. But the judge doesn't really have any decision in the trier of fact. It's the jury who decides what evidence is true, whether to put guilt or not guilt upon that defendant. It's ironic, very much so, but I wouldn't put too much weight on who that particular judge is presiding over these cases.
All right. You and I personally haven't talked since the mistrial was declared, but we did have several conversations of how you thought the jury could really struggle through this mountain of evidence and having to decide between this sort of third-party culprit defense and what the Commonwealth was putting forward. Are you surprised that that's where we ended with a hung jury?
I wasn't surprised after the first 24 hours. After the first 24 hours, I really was leaning toward a hung jury because at that point, you could see that there was an impasse already. They had a significant time to deliberate, I believe, and the closer we got to that Friday Eve when the question first came in, it really looked like it was going to be a hung jury from that point. So to answer your question, no, I'm absolutely not surprised. And whether they retry her or not, I think they're going to have a really difficult time again if they go with the same set of facts, same set of charges. So the prosecution is going to really have to change up their strategy if they retry again.
Yeah, that part was really surprising to me, especially how quickly they decided that they were going to retry. What do they do? So
you have to look at the totality of the circumstances, right? We still have a deceased person from the Boston police, right? And his family was sitting through this entire trial. The prosecutor's office has to bring justice to that family. So it is in their best interest to retry it. So they're having a lot of public attention. I do believe they needed to make the statement. They made the statement they're going to retry, and if they do, they just really have to restructure how they're going to do that.
All right. We're so grateful for your insight, Murgietta, and for the fact that you actually worked in a Beverly Cannone courtroom. All right. Judge Cannone isn't the only familiar character in the Brian Walsh trial. As we've touched on before, Michael Proctor, the lead investigator in the Karen Reed murder case, was also the lead investigator in the Walsh case. Proctor has now been sidelined by state police while his conduct is under investigation. Our John Maroney has more tonight on the fallout.
She's a whack job.
Michael Proctor's testimony in the Karen Reed murder trial has landed him in hot water while raising questions about his role in another high-profile murder case involving Brian Walsh.
Every single aspect of the investigation that Trooper Proctor touched is going to be really scrutinized.
Walsh has pleaded not guilty to killing and dismembering his wife, Anna. As the lead investigator, Proctor signed the criminal complaint against Walsh. His attorney tells NBC 10 they plan to ask the court to review the trooper's handling of the investigation, given his similar role in the Reed case.
I could see them going to great lengths to not put him on as a witness.
A criminal defense instructor at the BU School of Law, Shira Diner, says Michael Proctor is problematic for prosecutors.
I think the defense lawyer is going to be in a very strong position to be asking for internal affairs reports, to be asking for other kind of potential bias discovery that we usually have a hard time getting.
Trooper Proctor.
NBC 10 investigator Kathy Curran tried unsuccessfully to ask Trooper Proctor about his bombshell testimony. Not long after a mistrial was declared, state police said he had been relieved of duty.
We are going to see everybody going back into the past, at least taking a look at every single case, probably, that Trooper Proctor has worked on.
Legal analyst Peter Ellikins says it's hard to predict Proctor's impact on the Walsh trial. He does expect to see him on the stand.
Because if the prosecution doesn't want to bring him in, then the defense in all likelihood would.
Michael Proctor is, of course, the subject of an internal affairs investigation that could determine his future with state police. In Dedham, John Maroney, NBC 10 Boston.
Still ahead, a member of Reed's defense team joins us live. If you watched our live stream of the trial, you may recognize him as the man who sat behind Reed and her attorneys every day. So many of you sent questions asking, who is he? Well, it's Chris Bates, and he will share his unique perspective of the trial when we come back. Welcome back. Tonight, I'm joined by Craig Bates, founder of Telegenics. Thank you for joining us, Craig.
Your company, welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Your company offers audio and visual support in the courtroom. According to the Telegenics website, you play a key role in the strategy, planning, and visual presentation of evidence. So I got to ask you first, where are you based, and how did you find yourself part of the Karen Reed defense team?
Sure. So I am based in just near the Los Angeles area in California. And I was originally had done a previous case with Alan Jackson in the Harvey Weinstein matter that took place a few years ago. We had done some previous cases prior to that, but he wanted really to bring me along for this one, and we worked very well in that one, and he wanted me to come out and be a part of this one as well.
And in this case, we saw that there were quite a few visual elements presented by the defense. Talk me through where it all comes from. Are you recruiting the content yourself, or does it come from discovery?
So it comes from discovery. All of the materials filtered into my possession throughout the case. There was a lot of preparation that would go on before each witness that the Commonwealth would put on, and we would make sure that we had everything lined up that we wanted to show each of them. And so I was kind of getting it piecemeal as the trial went on from day to day.
So one piece of the Commonwealth's visual evidence got a lot of attention because it showed video from the Sally port that was inverted, and there was sort of no disclaimer ahead of time that that was the case. And it appeared there was some level of shock in the courtroom from your team. What was going on at that moment when you and the others realized that the video didn't seem quite right?
Right. We were looking at a video, and soon we began to discuss how it was looking. We noticed, as it's being shown now, that the word police and the number 4 were inverted or reversed in its imagery. And, it took immediate attention to that, and quickly realized that this video was, being presented on the first day of testimony as a mirrored or flopped image. And so that evening, we got a hold of the original, which you're playing now, and took the time to invert it. And of course, when we did, the inversion then also inverted the timestamp. So it became very curious to us as to how this was produced with an inverted video and yet showing the time in a corrected format that you could read.
Can you think of any other time you were sitting on the defense side of a courtroom when something like this happened, when a piece of video was being presented in front of a jury, not in the same way that you saw it during discovery?
Yeah, it was very unusual. The first time that we did see it as an inverted video. And of course, there's been so much attention drawn to the right rear portion of the Lexus, and it just seemed very odd, and we took a closer and closer look at it and soon realized that this was not right. And we then were able to present what really they should have seen the first time, which was a view of the video that showed it in its correct form.
All right, we've heard that the DA plans to move forward with a retrial. Do you plan to return for that trial?
If called to come back, I certainly would. Yeah, I am very dedicated to the Werksman Jackson Quinn team, and if called to do that, I'd be back here again. It was a stretch, of course, for the duration of 11 weeks to be out here, but I'm very dedicated to what I do and to this case.
Yeah, speaking of the length of the trial, we would expect, or at least what our legal experts tell us, is that the prosecution will pare down its case when it goes at it a second time. So how would that affect what you do?
Well, it's a little premature for me to discuss exactly what my role in a possible round 2 might look like. But if it means that we'd be presenting less material in the second go round, then so be it. I felt that we were really hand-strapped. We were very much had our hands tied many times during this case, which was kind of an unusual experience in terms of trying to get evidence in and being able to, show it to the jurors, like we have had an experience of being able to do much more of that in so many other cases that I've worked on.
All right, Craig, let me see if I can get you on a one-word answer with this. This ended in a mistrial. For you and the defense team, do you consider that a win or a loss?
I do consider it a win. It's certainly not a conviction. And of course, we believed all along that Karen was innocent. And we look forward to whatever challenge may be coming. I know that's far more than one word that you asked for, but I certainly believe it's much more than I ever believed that this was ever going to become a conviction. Certainly an acquittal is what we were after, but we'll take it in steps however we need to in the coming months and years.
Craig Bates, founder of Telegenics, thank you so much for your insights. It was super valuable.
Thank you. I appreciate having me on tonight.
We should know we reached out multiple times to the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office to see if they would like to come on Canton Confidential to discuss the case. That invitation remains open. But for now, they have declined and referred us back to the statement they made following the trial, which in part thanked the O'Keefe family for their commitment and dedication to this long process and said the Commonwealth intends to retry the case. Emily D. Baker joins us next.
So no matter how frustrated you are, I would ask that you consider placing your frustration until we know more. The frustration here goes with the attorneys, right? It is the job of the attorneys to make the case clear. This case was not clear enough for this jury, which means that instead of coming to a compromise guilty, which I don't think would have felt like a fair result to many of you, instead of coming to a compromise guilty, they held their ground. If you believe
She's followed the trial from the beginning and has brought great insight here on Canton Confidential, as well as her podcast and YouTube pages. Tonight, we welcome back legal expert Emily D. Baker. Emily, it's so good to have you back with us.
Good to see you. Glad to be back.
All right. So that was a clip from your live stream on Monday. You said you believe a mistrial is a win for the defense and not for the Commonwealth. Explain why.
Absolutely. So I am a former prosecutor, so that's my perspective on all of this. The prosecution has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And a hung jury means that they did not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, or they didn't pick a good jury. And that is their responsibility and their job to do. At jury selection, you have to pick a jury that is going to work for you and for your case. And by the interview we saw with an alternate juror, this jury got along well. It wasn't that one juror was just standing there saying, I'm not going to deliberate. They got along well, and they genuinely saw the evidence differently, which is on the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. It's on the defense to make sure there's plenty of doubt. And when a jury can't reach a decision, that means that there was doubt there.
It's so interesting to have this conversation with you, Emily, because you spent so much time trying cases in a courtroom, and now you spend a lot of time on social media. And this case exploded on social media. Can you draw a comparison for us on the way that this really caught fire outside the courtroom, not just here in Massachusetts, but across the country?
It's interesting to see, and I can compare it back to my live stream. So I'm streaming to about 50,000 live concurrent viewers, and I see what they're talking about on the chat. For this particular case, I did not engage much across other social platforms and look at what was saying. I really wanted to focus on what was presented in court, and it seemed that people watching the trial tried to really take the trial the same way. Is the defense going to show us what they talked about in opening? Is the prosecution going to show us what they talked about in opening? And trying to figure out where the truth is. And in this case, it was a hard one. We got to those last few witnesses that really threw a wrench into everything. And you're looking at this case at the end going, I don't know if I have clear answers. So I'm not surprised it's been discussed a lot, because it's not clear cut and it's not a clean and easy case. And so many locally followed it so long before this caught national attention on YouTube and social media and across channels like yours.
And that explanation you just gave maybe leaves us not being surprised that we ended with a hung jury. When in your career you face that similar result, what's your process for deciding first whether you will try the case again and how to try the case again?
There's always a time afterwards, and I was critical of the prosecution for coming out with such a fast statement. I think there's always a time for reflection on where you could have proved the case better, if you could prove the case better, what the victim's family wants to do, how they're feeling, and how your witnesses are feeling. This is not just difficult on the victim's family. There's a ton of civilian witnesses here who had to testify, and this can't be easy on them locally either. So there's a lot of conversations to be had, and then conversations to be had with colleagues. And if there are going to be other prosecutors coming in on a retrial to lend support or a fresh perspective, it's a lot of time for first taking a breath after 9 weeks or 10 weeks of trial, and then reassessing where you're going to go forward. And I think the prosecution already put their flag in the ground saying they're going to retry it. But that was just hours before we learned that Michael Proctor is getting reassigned, and there could be more to come from it. There's a lot of factors outside the trial that prosecution has to think about, and that includes what's going to happen with this federal investigation. That's a very unique and unusual circumstance that doesn't happen in most cases.
We're following both of those threads very closely, Trooper Proctor and the parallel federal investigation. Once they reach their conclusions, Emily D. Baker, you've got to come back and talk to us then.
Oh, I'm happy to. It's gonna upend everything. And the prosecution saying so firmly, we're gonna retry this case might be something they have to reassess depending on what happens in that federal investigation and depending on what happens with this IA investigation with their lead investigator, Michael Proctor. It's not gonna get better.
Emily D. Baker, thanks for your insights.
Good to see you.
You're watching Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial. That's it for tonight. Tomorrow, we are taking a break for the 4th of July holiday, but we'll be back with Canton Confidential on Friday night at 7. We hope you will join us then. I'm Glenn Jones. Happy 4th. Thanks for being with us.